The ECB announced last week that England head coach John Lewis has left his post before announcing that Heather Knight is no longer the captain. Was it inevitable that that sort of scale of change would happen after the 16-0 defeat in the Ashes? Lizzie Ammon, as I said, joins us, one of the excellent Times newspaper's team of cricket writers. Lizzie, I'm guessing, but I shouldn't preempt this, that you're not surprised.
I'm not surprised by John Lewis going. I'm a little surprised by Heather going. I didn't think they would necessarily want to change both coach and captain at the same time, not least because it's not immediately obvious who would replace Heather. I mean, I know that Nat Branch is the vice captain and obviously is a sort of natural successor, but she's also so important to the team as an all-rounder that you wouldn't necessarily want to take away from that. And I don't know that she loves captaincy, but I suspect she will take over because she seems to be the only kind of obvious candidate. So I'm a little surprised, yes, Neil, that they did it both. They also did it in a very odd way. They announced John Lewis on Friday and then Heather Knight on Saturday which slightly prolongs the reminder that the Ashes was so disastrous. If you keep drip feeding things out day after day, you keep reminding people that they lost 16-0.
Yeah, Izzy, I'm with you. I mean, you look at it; it's such a tough place to go. You know, I can only speak from the sort of men's point of view. I've been 2 Australian tours and I got belted 4-1 and 5-0. It's not the easiest place to go. England weren't the favourites, even probably in England. If it was in England in our own conditions, I don't think the women's team were going to go into that series as favourites. So I was surprised that Heather going. I actually thought it was quite disrespectful the way they did it as well. I mean, like you say, straight after John Lewis, and then it was like cutthroat. And when you look at Heather Knight's record, the record's very, very good. So, I mean, you mentioned that Skipper Brunt, where do they go? But surely somebody inside ECB Towers has got to go, you know, have we got an obvious captain? Possibly, yes, and that's Skipper Brunt. And was it that disastrous that Heather has to go? I can't really sort of palate the fact that we are putting too much emphasis on Heather Knight going as opposed to John Lewis as well. So that's my opinion on it when it comes to it. But when you look at that tour in isolation, yes, it was a difficult tour, but they are difficult tours to go on, the Ashes, aren't they?
I think it was the manner, Harmy. It wasn't the fact that they lost. Plenty of men's teams, as if you say, have gone to Australia and been hammered. It was the manner of the defeat because they just weren't at the races. They just looked so behind where Australia are in terms of athleticism, in terms of fitness, in terms of attitude, in terms of ruthlessness, in terms of all of those things. None of which I think is Heather's fault in any way. I'm not even sure it was John Lewis's fault. I think the girls need to look at themselves pretty long and hard, to be honest. There's also the element that is quite comfortable in that England team because there isn't anybody kind of nipping at their heels, really. We haven't had enough time with professionalism in the domestic game, nowhere near as much as Australia and nowhere near as much as investment. That excuse is no longer, actually, because there is a lot of money going into to English women's cricket. And so there will be increasing depth and there will be competition for places and the girls can't rest on their laurels. But they did look, it looked a bit, I don't know, like a school trip at points. And that's not all right when you're getting paid a lot of money like that. I'm not sure any of it was John's fault or Heather's fault, but having had a review of not just the Ashes, but bombing out of the T20 World Cup at the group stage last year, failing a miserable 50-over tournament the year before. The results have been going backwards really since the 2017 World Cup when they obviously won at Lord's. So I think change was needed. She'd done the job for 9 years. That's a long time to be England captain. That's more than most men do it for. But I don't know about the wisdom of changing both coach and captain at the same time when you've got a 50-over World Cup coming up in October. There's a home T20 World Cup next year. I don't know about the wisdom of it, really.
Harmy mentioned Heather's record, played 199 games as captain, won 135, lost 55. That's a win ratio of 67%. It includes 3 World Cup finals and a World Cup win in 2017. She's only just turned 34. Maybe this is her Joe Root moment. Maybe she can have an Indian summer, so to speak, in her career. Is she going to stay on? She wants to.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think I think it probably will be very good, actually, that she's released from the shackles of that, because she is, I mean, undoubtedly an incredibly talented cricketer, and a really sensible cricketer, and she can anchor things, and she can. So it's to be hoped that she now is released from the shackles of captaincy, goes on and has, 3, 4, 5 years of fantastic time scoring billions of runs. And based on what we've seen over the winter, England need those runs.
Lizzie, before we come on to the replacement, this could be a really sort of cold, callous question, but because of the 100 and the money that's come into it, you mentioned a professionalism that has to sort of get better. Because of what's happened with 100, with the women's game, which is, I mean, it's gone in such a fast forward direction, than even better than the men's. Have the women's game been complacent? Have they rested on their laurels? Are they looking at that England tracksuit and going, it's actually quite nice to wear, as opposed to now, with the money that you are earning, you are accountable? Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's central contracts that they get from the ECB, which, are separate to their 100 money. And they also, some of them get women's IPL money, they get sponsorship. It's good money. I mean, it's very good money. They also get all the access to business class travel, nice hotels, nutritionists, strength and conditioning coaches, all the gyms. I mean, they get afforded everything now. So there really is no excuse for not performing, and there's no excuse for not being athletic. There's no excuse for not being fit, because these are minimum professional standards that are expected of you when you are on these lucrative contracts. And I think historically some of the problem, of course, has been that because we haven't had the setup in the domestic game, there hasn't been the depth of players coming through. So then if your place is secure, that it's quite easy to go, well, I can just rest on my laurels a bit. But that can't happen anymore. There is a new system in English women's cricket starting this year with the Tier 1 county teams, of which there are 8 this year, going to be 9, 10 in the future. And they are linked with the men's counties. They have got good resources. They've got, they're on fully professional contracts. So these women will get better and better and better. And the 100 really helps us. I mean, the 100 has been enormous for women's cricket in this country. But you've got to hope, actually, that the impact is that there is so much depth to pick from. I mean, Australia could put out 2 11s. I mean, it's not the same with the women as it has always been with the men. That when they get an injury, you saw in the Ashes, someone just as good is coming in to take their place. And I'm not sure we've had that in England.
Okay, well, the new dream team then. I mean, if Nat Sciver-Brunt said, and she was asked the question, she didn't volunteer it, she said she would love to captain England. And so if she's the obvious person as captain, and your concerns were obviously, we shared them about Ben Stokes taking over, and that went quite well.
Well, hopefully this will too.
Okay, and Charlotte Edwards then, is there really a better candidate to take over as coach? I mean, she's just led the Mumbai Indians women to another WPL title. She just seems to have all the credentials.
She absolutely does. She is the number one choice, has to be the number one choice. The only question is whether she wants to do it. And she has been a non-committal. She said she'd like to help England out when she was asked, but she stopped a bit short of saying that she definitely would like to be head coach. I think she might feel, now that Heather's gone, though, that actually she could completely shape the team from scratch with a new captain, a new coach. And that might be a very exciting prospect for her. But she has got a lot of good gigs. She's the new head coach of the Hampshire Tier 1 women's team. She's Mumbai Indians, as you say. She's Southern Brave. She's got a gig in, is it with the Hobart in the Hobart, in the Big Bash League? So she's got some really nice franchise gigs, and that's quite a nice life, the franchise gig coach. You have your little period of coaching, and then you have some time off, and then you a little bit more, and so she will. I mean, they'll have to you know, make it worth her while to her to take it, if you get my drift. But I think she's got to be the number one candidate. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they've got to try and somehow strong arm her, because I think what now more than anything else, I think, is inspiration. I think they need leadership, but which is all teams need leadership, but I think to inspire. And I think, you know, there's nobody can look around the room at the coach and sort of question the coach's credentials or anything like that. And then I'm not saying that they question John Lewis's credentials, but when you're looking at Charlotte Edwards, who has done everything in the game, won everything in the game, I mean, that would be very, very difficult not to go that little bit further and make sure that you are at your peak fitness. You are doing the right things, which is this little small thing which make a huge amount of difference, especially to a team environment. But the alternatives, Lizzie, I mean, the other John Lewis, because I spoke to JJ a couple of days ago. He's off to Australia with the A-side. Gareth Breeze. I mean,
Jonathan Batty is a good option, but I do think that they probably want a woman, because, and I'll have the conversation that you two are a little less comfortable about, but I think it's easier for a woman to say to women, you've got to get fit, you've got to do this. It's much easier for a woman to say that to another woman. I mean, that's just the facts. It's very difficult for a man, and I do get that, to say, you're a little out of shape, you need to do something about it. So I think they probably do want a woman. But there is Jonathan Batty. There's Sally Ann Briggs, who's I think she's the general manager at Cricket Tasmania at the moment. But Charlotte Edwards is your number one candidate.
Yeah, but and I mean, we have to clarify here. We're not saying the England cricket team is sort of is overweight and
no,
not I think it sounds as though we're doing that, and I think it's just the small little things. Looking from afar, I think it's the small little things that when you're trying to impress and you're trying to be the best, especially when they were trying to make the 100 and make the women's game such a marketable product, that I think once it got to a point, it was a marketable product. Talking about having the test matches in MCG or at Lords, then you're talking about having standalone 100 games for the women. This is telling you that the women's game is going in such a fast trajectory that I think it's possibly left the players behind, because the players maybe are just leaving that little 1, 2, 3, 4 percenters, and then when you get it to a lengthy time of period, then all of a sudden there's no coming back for it. And the hardest thing to do and then is go and play against the best, because they are not resting on their laurels. So I think we've got to try and clarify that. We're not saying
I think it's just during the Ashes we could just see a difference between Australia and England in terms of just the pure athleticism, just round the field, the catching, all of those things. And if you want to beat the best, and you've got to be able to meet their standards, and I think that's just what people are saying, really. But I think Charlotte Edwards, as going back to the coach issue, there are good candidates. I mean, there are some left field candidates, maybe Danny Hazel.
I've been watching Danny from closely at Durham, because my niece is in the academy at the Durham women's team. Obviously, my son's there, and they train a lot together. The sort of boys and girls train a lot together in the gym, and boy, tell you what, the girls are working hard. I mean, the girls are working really hard up at Durham. So I can only talk about what I'm seeing from my own eyes. So hopefully that's a starter of just, I mean, we're not talking about huge amount of improvement. We're just talking about fine details, which make a massive difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a number of candidates, but I think it's Charlotte Edwards and then everyone else. I mean, she's got such good credentials. And she's been away from the team long enough now. I think it's been nine years. She's been away from the team long enough that she's not close to them. She's not good friends with them. I mean, she's obviously played with Heather. She would probably have played a bit with Nat, but not too many of the others. Tammy Beaumont, maybe. Not too many of the others. And I think that was some of the issue last time they were looking for a coach. They just felt it was a bit too, I think it was a bit too soon, and that she was, there was too much crossover. But now I think it is the perfect time. And there's a project here, because there's a 50-over World Cup in the autumn, and then a home T20 World Cup. And the last time they lifted silverware was at home. There's another one next year, and that would be wonderful symmetry, wouldn't it, if they could be really successful in a home ICC tournament?